Well, over the years I suffered nightmares initially, things like the Angolan fighter jets that were in the sky hunting us. I've had woken up with that sound in my head.
A quest for healing and reconciliation from a war-ravaged past is pulling former soldiers of the old SADF back to Angola, the stage of a massive battle in 1987-88.
You need to come back and make peace for yourself because it haunts you. Memories and even the fears that you experienced while you were up there.
Ghosts of an almost 3-decade-old battle haunt many, while mechanical skeletons litter the landscape as painful reminders to the people of Angola of a war they never chose.
Because after Cuito-Cunavale, this region remained in war. Only from 2005 up to now, we started demining this area.
And long after the war is over, many deadly dangers still remain hidden, taking its toll on civilians.
Many people lost their lives. Many people today are injured, they're amputees.
Tonight's special assignment brings you the first installment of a 5,000-kilometer journey by former enemies of Angola to Cuito Cuanavale and back. It's almost 30 years on, and the hotly contested battle at Cuito Cuanavale in southern Angola remains a controversial topic. There's still no consensus from parties involved in the battle as to who won. It was an ideological battle as much as it was about deadly weapons.
The South Africans definitely won the first stages. That was their whole aim, to stop the advance, pushed back the FAPLA forces, and eventually got them right to Cuito, but we didn't get all of them past the Cuito River. So I think you could say there was about a 90% success.
Do we say we have a victory? Because from here, Namibia got their independence, and the regime of apartheid fell a few years later.
In my opinion, I think the liberation movement came out victorious there because you remember, immediately after that, you discover Namibia was free. And South Africa went to negotiations. And here we are, the country is free.
We see Cuito-Cunavale and our participation in that battle as an important contribution to the struggles of the people of Africa. We see it today as an episode that helped change the political context in Southern Africa at the time.
For many former SADF soldiers like Johan Boysen, the battle has left a stain on their souls. The need for Johan to try and reconcile his past has been pulling him back to Cuito Cuanavale for years. But can there be reconciliation for the everyday people of Angola, given the devastating impact of this war? The battle around Cuito Cuanavale in 1987-88 is the largest land battle fought in Africa since World War II, 42 years before. It played out against the backdrop of the ending of the Cold War between America and the former Soviet Union. In 1987, FAPLA, the army of the ruling party of Angola, the MPLA, moved south as they had attempted before to try and push the opposition movement UNITA out of their southeastern stronghold. The two had already been engaged in civil war for over a decade, but this time the FAPLA forces had been beefed up with the support from the Soviets.
It was the largest compilation of Russian equipment, anti-aircraft-wise, ever outside the Six-Day War in Israel. And they knew they had to do it because the South Africans would come to the assistance of UNITA and retaliate with aircraft.
South African government by that time used to say that they were stopping the expansion of Russian and Cuban communism from Angola to South Africa. Angola was supporting ANC and SWAPO troops, and that was justified the invasion of South Africa to Angolan territory. So Angola was a threat for the apartheid regime and for the independence of Namibia.
MK was based in Angola. It had various camps in Angola. many camps. Some were for refresher course, and some were for training, and some we had about 4 camps in around Angola. I was in Angola by then during the Battle of Cuito Cuanavale. MK wasn't directly involved in that battle, but MK and Plan as guerrilla forces were gathering intelligence, doing some reconnaissance on behalf of FAPLA and gathering information, because remember the Afrikaners by that time, they were there using Afrikaans, and nobody from the Angolan side, or rather the Cuban, could speak Afrikaans.
At the time, the United States and apartheid South Africa supported the rebel movement UNITA, led by Jonas Savimbi, against the communist-aligned Angolan government. UNITA's occupation of the South also assisted South Africa in keeping control of Namibia.
South Africans realized that this force would not be contained by UNITA themselves. And then the South African Defence Force High Command tasked 61 MEC, which was our reaction force, to get involved in this battle on the 3rd of October 1987. When 61 got involved with this brigade that have come down here and totally stopped the advance by destroying that 47th Brigade.
The Americans had the communications, they had control of the satellite, and the South Africans trained them and gave them arms. So Angola was not fighting only against UNITA rebels, it was against American power and against South Africa.
The FAPLA forces pulled back from the Lomba River towards Cuito Cuanavale.
The South African High Command decided to push all these brigades back and try and push them across the Cuito and the Cuanavale River. That was the whole idea.
Cuba sent hundreds of thousands of troops to support the MPLA during its time of war.
They made an international call requesting help for them to be protected, and Cuba responded. Cuba's military involvement in Angola is perhaps Cuba's most important foreign policy engagement in the history of the Cuban Revolution. No other third world country has been able ever to influence political and military events at the other side of the world, in another continent.
The Cubans came in with total different forces. They were all over the place. There were eventually between 30 and 50,000, according to themselves, that were deployed here. We, at no stage, were more than 3,000 South African troops north of the borders. At no stage, more than 22 tanks, and we were opposed by more than 100 T-55 Russian tanks.
South African strategy, it was just to occupy Cuito-Cunavale, occupy Menongue, and from Menongue to occupy all the central of Angola, Wambo, up to the sea, Benguela. We have the Benguela railways, which divides north and south of Angola. If they could reach that point, they could divide Angola in 2 countries.
There was never even an intention to take 1 inch of Angola. There was not even an intent to take Cuito-Cunavale. At most, I would say, it would be, and that was clear, to try and push the forces back and allow UNITA to operate freely in this area. Yes, because that would assist the aim of not allowing SWAPO to move in here to be able to infiltrate south.
Tinha muitas baixas em carros blindados, muitas avarias.
Apart from this battle, Angola started another battle on West, on west.
Chipa e Calueque.
Yeah. And in Calueque, it was west, in the border with Namibia. South Africa didn't have troops to defend that position.
Todas ficou aqui. Mas com as nossas tropas, com a aproximação
We, with the Cubans, were in a position to enter Namibia. That's why they went to sign the 435 resolution for the independence of Namibia.
The resolution saw Cuba and South Africa withdraw from Angola and SADF from Namibia, resulting in its independence. After 10 long months of intense battle, Cuba and FAPLA lost over 4,700 soldiers. SADF claims it lost 31, excluding UNITA soldiers who fought alongside them. But all sides seem to agree on one thing.
was a major turning point in the liberation struggle, particularly in Southern African liberation movements, because that bring in a new era, introduce a new era of negotiations, of pushing, of speeding up the liberations of this country.
This whole battle here, as well as what happened afterwards, got the negotiation process going and got the Cubans out of Angola.
The Southern Africa region started in this battle.
It helped to secure the military conditions for the implementation of the UN resolution that led to the independence of Namibia, and it helped to defeat the military machinery of the apartheid regime.
After the break, we meet Johan Boysen, who's going back to Cuito-Cunavale to reconcile his ugly past.
The army was part of life, all of us.
Johan Boysen from Roodepoort, west of Johannesburg, is a war veteran of the SADF who fought in the Battle of Cuito-Cunavale.
You don't know if you're going to wake up in the morning, or are you going to see going to go to sleep tonight? Are you going to have breakfast? Are you going to have lunch? You never knew. And I think all the soldiers that was in some of the other operation or contact situation or just in the area, you live with that fear constantly, and you never actually get that fear out of your system.
Johan was born in Johannesburg into an Afrikaans family in 1969, a time during which South Africa was under apartheid rule.
We were brought up that the terrorist, if I can call it that, or Sizwe, and the photographs or whatever, that was the enemy. This is the guys that wants to take over our country. So you were taught not to trust them, not to be close to them. They were the enemy in our lives.
Johan had big dreams for himself upon leaving high school, but he said he was forced to go to the army. Although some chose to be defiant and even skip the country, it was compulsory for white South African men to serve in the SADF for 2 years.
You go there with all of these great ideas of, I want to become a dominee, or I want to become an engineer. And when I came back, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life.
Many of our people were 17, 18 years old, and that's the terrible thing of war. I think it's very, very difficult to understand war really, but the impact of war is that psychological woundedness inside, that you're actually supposed to kill people, wound people, and that innocent people actually die because of that.
Rolf Skuman was also a conscripted SADF soldier in 1982 and was part of the 701 Battalion based in Namibia while South Africa fought to retain control of that country. Today he's working towards a PhD in practical theology in order to support military veterans in dealing with the after effects of war.
They were actually going there with this wonderful sense of adventure, going there and think, it's a man's world and we're going to fight a war, and they were not spiritually and emotionally matured enough to handle all their challenges.
You learn how to keep your fear inside and how to keep your emotions inside, and when you're with your buddies, you're always the strong one, and we're all these toughies, but deep down inside you hurt, and deep down inside you're actually under pressure, unstable.
To deal with these demons, Johan made a decision to return to Cuito-Cunavale in Angola.
I've always wanted to go back, and there was just always a closed door. You could never find an opportunity. And when I got Paul's book and I read it, I thought, what, this is what I want to do. This is what I need to do for myself. And we actually got hold of Paul. He came back to us, gave us the contact that he utilized, that also made it possible for us to go in. And I needed to do it.
These journeys are deeply personal, and for some people going back is going to bring that peace, and for other people there are different paths to go, and might not mean going back to Angola. And he decided that this was for him, and I gave him what advice I could about getting into the country, and then he invited me along to sort of join as part of the support crew.
Shortly before Boyson, Paul Morris was also a conscript sent to the SADF in 1986-87.
I had no intention of going if I wasn't going to be called up. Of course, once the papers came, it was a choice between going in the military or going to jail potentially, or leaving the country.
Morris would also form part of the infantry unit 61 Mechanized Battalion and would fight in a number of ferocious battles leading up to the battle at Cuito Cuanavale. Morris often describes the horror of war in his book.
Initially, things like the Angolan fighter jets that were in the sky hunting us, I've had woken up with that sound in my head. Years later, I started getting what are known as night terrors, waking up with a start in the night, thinking that there was someone standing over the bed. I couldn't directly link it to the war.
Through his personal training as a psychotherapist, Morris identified that his post-war trauma was affecting his present life.
I decided I wanted to go back to Angola and see the country in peacetime, in an attempt to change my memories, or not change my memories of the war, but to add new memories of Angola that would be memories of peace and memories of peacemaking, kind of a reconciliation, really. I mean, it's very hard to talk about the war because of the language gap, and I think it was important for me to be able to explain, if I was going to talk about the war, to explain the subtleties of why I'd come back, and that I thought that for example, that I shouldn't have been there in the first place during the war, and that I believe that the South African involvement, South Africans shouldn't have been involved in the war.
In 2012, 25 years after the war, Morris got the opportunity to return to Angola, but decided to do it on a bicycle.
I wanted to have the richest possible experience of Angola, and I could have taken a 4x4 and done the trip in a 4x4. But I felt that Angola, the areas that we were travelling in are very poor, people don't have a lot, and if I'd arrived there in a big, shiny, expensive vehicle, I would instantly have a huge gulf between me and the people that I wanted to meet and talk to. And I wanted to move slowly. I wanted to, we lived in the bush for 3 months in Angola, and I was in the Namibian bush for a year, and the smells, the tastes, the sounds, I wanted that to be part of the whole experience, so that we could really reintegrate the past with the present.
He cycled 1,500 kilometers from Cuito Cuanavale in Angola to Tsumeb in Namibia in 3 weeks. For him, the journey helped him find closure and healing.
It did feel very meaningful in Cuito Cuanavale when I met that Cuban who'd fought at Cuito on the other side. And when he called me when he said we are brothers, and that was very deeply touching. And I think that is linked to this forgiveness thing, this kind of reaching out over to the other side and saying sorry for being here as a soldier and doing what I did.
In 1987-88, Johan Boyson fought for the old SADF in the battle around Cuito Cuanavale in Angola. His involvement in the battle has disturbed him for decades, and he feels like his past is unresolved. Johan's been planning for over a year to travel back to where he experienced the trauma in order to get closure.
I've decided I need to try and put it to bed, but also do something extra, and make it an experience, not just for myself, but for Wayne. It was up with myself as well, Tammy, my daughter, my 2 brothers, Steve and Quibus, so that they can also experience what this country is like and what the guys went through.
Johan and I were in the army together in 87, 88, and we both were up here in Angola. We first were down at Mavinga, and that's where I was. I was never at Cuito,
but this is my first time here.
We are a very close-knit family, so we always travel in this big group, all the uncles and aunts and everybody. And we were sitting talking about the army, and at the end of the day it came out that everybody has some sort of history towards the Angolan side, and we decided that we needed to come and see what changes have come about.
I think that's been part of the like twofold thing of being up here. Obviously in support of his nightmares and things that he's going through. Yeah, so it's been very important. I mean, we've been friends for a long time.
They'll do most of the trip on motorcycles despite the long stretches of hazardous dirt roads in Angola.
We wanted to make an adventure out of it as well, and also give each person time to get his mind to, give himself some room where you can play with your thoughts, and also the challenge. As I said, all of us, we're not big bikers. We haven't been doing it for ages, and it was a personal challenge set to each one of us to take on.
Healing will take time for ordinary Angolans affected by the war. As a symbolic peace offering, which they hope to continue, Johan and his family have collected stationery for the children.
We wanted to give back to the community from old SADF soldiers, not just guys that was in Cuito itself, but also older veterans, which is in our group. And we've decided to reach out to the kids, because the kids is our future. And by reaching out to them, we can hopefully get peace within themselves, within the community.
The journey by road to Cuito Cuanavale and back will be over 5,000 kilometers, mostly along dangerous roads. It'll take the group across 4 borders, from Johannesburg to Botswana, Botswana to Namibia, and from Namibia to Angola. In an area where they were enemy soldiers, why do Johan and others feel the need to return to where they experienced their trauma?
For you to experience healing, you need to speak about it. You need to break the avoidance. You need to have discussions about it. You need to go back to that horrible traumatic incident and address it again, because of the emotional hurt that you need to address there.
Skuman says that the underlying effects of the trauma which war has on people like Johan and others can manifest in different ways and can also have a knock-on effect in society.
Important to help these individuals, because what they're suffering with has got an impact on themselves, their families and their communities, because many times they're experiencing this thing of, they don't understand me, my family don't understand me, the community don't understand. What we've seen happening is most of them don't cope with all the challenges, and now they're using other coping capabilities, like using alcohol and drugs and other mechanisms that must help them to cope with the challenges that they're actually not taking care of in their own lives. And that's why a lot of these families are actually deteriorating.
The Angolan embassy could not participate in this program. Stay tuned for part 2, when special assignment follows Johan back into Cuito Cuanavale after 27 years. In part 1 of Skeletons of Cuito Cuanavale, special assignment looked at the role of the South African Defence Force in the battles around the area in the late 1980s, and we met former SADF troops who fought there. We questioned whether healing is possible for the locals, who are still reeling from the effects of war and the landmines it left behind, while former soldiers like Johan Boysen prepared to go back to the area to heal emotional traumas.
You need to come back and make peace for yourself, because it haunts you. Memories and even the fears that you experienced while you were up there.
For you to experience healing, you need to speak about it. You need to break the avoidance. You need to have discussions about it. You need to go back to that horrible traumatic incident and address it again.
Johan was sent to Cuito Cuanavale in 1987-88, when the area was the stage of a massive battle between rival Angolan factions, Cuba and South Africa. In 1975, when Angola got its independence from Portugal, the MPLA, a local party, took control of the country, but it was opposed by rival faction UNITA. This led to a violent civil war between the two. In the mid to late 80s, the Cold War was still playing out between the USA and the former Soviet Union, causing both to get involved in Angola. The Soviets supported the communist-aligned MPLA's FAPLA army, while Cuba sent hundreds of thousands of troops to their aid. The USA, as well as South Africa, supported the anti-communist movement, UNITA.
South African government by that time used to say that they were stopping the expansion of Russian and Cuban communism from Angola to South Africa. Angola was supporting ANC and SWAPO troops, and that was justified the invasion of South Africa into Angolan territory.
To try and push the forces back and allow UNITA to operate freely in this area, yes, because that would assist the aim of not allowing SWAPO to move in here to be able to infiltrate south.
The intense fighting took place between 86 and 88 between Mavinga and Cuito-Cuanavale. It said that Cuba and FAPLA lost just over 4,700 soldiers and that the SADF lost a disputed 31. This, however, excludes the deaths of thousands of UNITA soldiers whom South Africa fought alongside. Today, all sides claim victory. The battles credited with leading to the signing of the 435 resolution, which saw both Cuba and South Africa withdraw from Angola and South Africa from Namibia, giving the country its independence. Despite this, the Angolan Civil War continued for another decade, but the question remains whether the involvement of other countries only increased the fatalities on all sides. The SADF soldiers who fought at Cuito were forcibly conscripted into the army, like 600,000 others, between 1968 and 1993. Many were unprepared for the role they'd play as aggressor in the border wars.
It was a choice between going in the military or going to jail potentially, or leaving the country.
Many of our people were 17, 18 years old, and that's the terrible thing of war.
Former conscript Paul Morris regrets his involvement in the war in Angola. In 2012, he cycled 1,500 kilometers through Angola and Namibia to retrace his past steps and try find peace within himself and to interact with the local people.
It was important for me to be able to explain, if I was going to talk about the war, to explain the subtleties of why I'd come back, and that I thought that for example, that I shouldn't have been there in the first place during the war, and that I believe that the South African involvement, South Africans shouldn't have been involved in the war.
Tonight in part 2, we follow Johan Boysen, who after 27 years goes on a similar trip to heal the emotional wounds of fighting at the Battle of Cuito-Cuanavale. Can Johan cope when he comes face to face with his past?
The closer we got to Cuito, the more the build-up started in myself, and a lot of old emotions came back in me again.
Locals have no choice but to live with the painful reminders of the past as nearly 3-decade-old war relics litter the landscape. And silent killers in the form of landmines lie dormant beneath the soil long after the war is over. Johan Boysen is one of the many 600,000 soldiers who were conscripted to the former SADF during the apartheid years, who's been left traumatized by his war experiences. The trauma still runs so deep that he battles to talk about it.
I'm not comfortable in going into details, but what I can say is I'm not the only person who's got all of these emotions inside of us.
Rolf Skuman was also a former SADF conscript. He now counsels ex-soldiers who suffer from trauma.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is actually a very sad thing that the soldiers are experiencing, because they don't realize the impact of this whole disorder on themselves, and also the impact of that on their families. Because these individuals didn't get the proper assistance, they're actually not coping with all the challenges individually in the new society of maintaining themselves in the workplace or wherever, and in their families. And now they're actually developing their own coping mechanisms, like alcohol, drugs.
Johan is returning to Cuito Cuanavale in Angola to deal with his past demons. The trip there and back is over 5,000 kilometers by road. We cross through South Africa, Botswana and Namibia to get to Angola. Hundreds of kilometers of unforgiving dirt road awaits us. Johan and his group are making the trip on motorcycles.
Because it takes you on a, also once again, emotional roller coaster ride, because just when you think, okay, now I've got control of it, it brings something else with. We weren't quite up to scratch for the conditions. We didn't expect it to be that bad, although we were warned beforehand. The Patrick said, you know what, it's going to be a tough road. Are you going to make it on the bikes? And we were adamant. You know, I wanted to give everybody that little bit of time by themselves to work it through their head of the problems that we've got. Each one has had a separate reason for going.
We travel the landscape of Angola for a number of tiring days over the dirt road. While we're travelling, we come across skeletons of machinery left behind from the war as everyday reminders to the people living there. While the sight fascinates us, the locals have grown accustomed to living side by side with relics of the war. They carry on with their daily lives, just trying to survive with the little that they have. We're back on the road driving through what feels like hundreds of kilometers of nothing but bush. Some trees bark that there may be landmines along the road. We haven't passed any toilets for many hours. Those who seek to go in privacy need to venture from the safety of the road into the bush. Thoughts of the landmine warnings we've seen in other places leave an uneasy feeling in the gut when walking in the bush, which makes me wonder how the people here live like this every day. We stop at a small village which still bears the scars of civil war. We speak to one of the locals to try and understand what happened here.
I was in the village at the time of the attack. The village was attacked while FAPLA and UNITA troops were fighting. UNITA attacked and destroyed the village. The people had to flee into the bushes.
Here, a rusted old FAPLA tank still stands nearby as proof of those violent, destructive times which the people of Angola have had to bear. Back then, UNITA is said to have attacked and burnt down many buildings, including this building where the nuns and nurses used to live. The little clinic in the village was also destroyed. This lonely wall is the only thing left standing of the former church. Ndala says they've been given no help to rebuild their lives. With the little that they have, they've constructed this modest church. A small school stands across the road displaying the Angolan flag. We're now in Monongi, a much larger town which used to be the supply base of the FAPLA troops during the Battle of Cuito Cuanavale. Here we visit the Halo Trust, an NGO which has been in Angola for 20 years, removing and destroying the debris of war, such as landmines, explosives and weapons.
This is our little display. It shows what we normally find into minefields. This, for example, is ppm2. This is buried underground. When you step this, it goes on and it can kill you, can injure you, a lot of problems.
A report by the government body CONIDA in 2003 estimates that there are about 4 million mines laid in Angola and that about 70,000 people have fallen victim to them. It's also affected building of roads and farming.
Many people today are injured, they're amputees, and after 13 years, there is a big difference because you can now circulate into roads, no problems in some of the roads. You can now go to cultivating fields, people have enough land to cultivate, and the government also is implementing their project like building schools and doing other works.
Former Angolan soldiers who fought alongside the Cubans are helping to locate mines that they planted. The SADF has supplied maps to the Angolan government, which shows where they laid mines. But despite all their good work, funding for the NGO is drying up, partly because donors feel that Angola has enough resources to sustain itself. Tony says that they've only cleared about 40% of the mines in the Cuando-Cubango province, in which Cuito-Cunavale falls.
Last month I destroyed 900 mines in Cuando-Cubango only. So So far, in terms of statistics, we have destroyed, since we are in Cuíto-Cunavale, 32,000 anti-person mines. We have destroyed around 14,000 anti-tank mines.
Before we depart for Cuito-Cunavale, we're all warned that the area is full of these silent killers which lie buried in the ground, waiting to be awakened from decades of slumber. The road between Monongi and Cuito-Cunavale is known as the Road of Death because so many men were killed on it during UNITA and SADF attacks on FAPLA supply convoys. Along this road, the bodies and skeletons of old trucks and military vehicles are especially visible, telling a tale of war and death.
We're about 6 kilometers from Cuito-Cunavale and we've come across a mass grave site where Angolan soldiers were buried after the battle. We're told that for 500 meters that way, 500 meters that way and 300 meters back is just grave sites where people have been buried.
The closer we got to Cuito, the more the build-up started in myself and a lot of old emotions came back in me again. As I said, stuff like soil. You know, for you it's just dirt. I could smell it. It smelled differently. The environment, everything there is just different, and it struck home again. And that brought all of those old feelings back into my system. And the fear was there.
The groups finally arrived in Cuito-Cunavale. It's been 27 years since Johan was last here, and he's been waiting a long time to return. Our first stop is a war memorial in the town erected to commemorate the battle. We're accompanied by a former FAPLA commando who fought there. He receives his former enemies warmly and is eager to chat to them about the past as well as the present. The mood is relaxed and friendly.
We killed each other here in Angola, and now we are here together. You are very welcome here. As a military official, I'm going to take them for a drink at the bar, and we will discuss the battle. Whose fighting was better than the other one? This is the only way for us to write the true African history. Our history has to be written by ourselves, not by Europeans or Americans. Thank God we are still alive, because we are in a position to heal the wounds and correct the failures of the past.
Thanks God we are still alive.
Doesn't make a difference on which side of the line he was. You bond immediately, because it's a feeling that only can be shared amongst each others. And I think he also understood what I was going through and the emotions inside of me. For him at that stage it wasn't about who won the battle. It was we shared a common ground.
Just then, loud noises start going off in the distance. We're told that it's the sight and sound of old landmines being detonated and destroyed. For Johan, the sound is so familiar and it resonates deep inside his core.
When the landmines exploded, that fear within me just exploded. The emotions was just there. I didn't know what to do with it. It was something I couldn't cope with. At that specific time, I didn't know how to cope with it. There was people around me, my loved ones, and it rattled me, and very hard.
My dad's a very quiet person when it comes to that. He doesn't show emotion very easily. But once we were here, you can actually see, you can see it affected him.
It's been arranged for us to go into the minefield with the Halo Trust to get up close and personal with these devices which continue the devastation of an old war. Signs of mine clearance are everywhere. Large craters frame the side of the road caused by mines which were detonated and destroyed. We stop and are allowed off the vehicle, but we have strict instructions to follow for our own safety.
So right here we are in Samaria, practically in Tumpu, and we are in the minefield. We are having this corridor and we are having these sticks which are painted red on top. We can't cross that limit.
A South African olifant tank, which was deserted in the minefield during the battle nearly 3 decades ago, was recently found here in December 2014. The area was previously inaccessible because of the mines.
What bogged us down eventually was the minefields, because if you go in with tanks and everything and you hit a mine, the tank stands because it's got tracks. And if you blow the tracks, you've got to get it out. So eventually the commanders at that time decided to not lose people, but leave the tanks there and came out.
The graves of some UNITA soldiers were also uncovered here during the demining process. These deceased men will likely remain unidentified forever.
2005 up to this 2015, which means 10 years of working. We have only cleared 25 minefields, and we are remaining with 40 minefields that are to be cleared, which means we are having a lot of work ahead.
A live landmine, slightly exposed, is shown to us. It's surreal to see something with so much potential deadly danger. Angola is one of the most landmine-dense countries in the world. 60% of war debris still needs to be clear. Visiting the minefields of Cuito-Cunavale is a harsh reminder of how the devastating impacts of war can last for decades. We're taken to another war memorial site, this time in the Tumpo Triangle. It's not yet open to the public, and we're told that we're the first South Africans to come here.
In the Tumpo Triangle, they've put up these big billboards. I mean, pictures of shot out SADF tanks and big maps of the war zone and where attacks came from, and it's very militaristic, and I'm not I'm kind of anti-militaristic, so and I guess if you have the army involved in commemorating things, then it's going to be militaristic, but I'm not a soldier anymore, and I would like to see something different. I'd like to see something that was more I suppose more anti-war, more saying let's not let it happen again.
It's our last day in Cuito-Cunavale. The bikers will be distributing stationery and toys to the children. For Johan's group, it's a symbolic peace offering to the town.
By reaching out to them, we can hopefully get peace within themselves, within the community, and also build a trust relationship or a type of relationship between ourselves and the town, which played a big role in the actual new South Africa. Because Cuito played a big role in it. But nobody is actually benefiting out of it except South Africa. Cuito-Cunavale is not getting anything back from that.
But order isn't maintained for long. Some children and adults manage to leave with numerous things, while others leave with nothing. But the books are in English, so the majority of the people here who speak only Portuguese will not even be able to read them. A little girl who can speak English reads for me, while other children look on curiously.
Once upon a time, there was a pretty princess who had a golden bow. She was very fond of her bow and always played with it.
The bikers hope to continue sending these types of donations to Cuito-Cunavale. For them, it's a sign of goodwill, but will it have any bearing on reconciliation with Angola and the lives of the people there?
The princess sat down
After a number of days back on the treacherous dirt road, Johan and his group have reached the border to exit Angola.
We're exiting Angola today, going back to Rundu. The last time I was in Angola, I was Karazabek out, so I actually feel quite well because this time I'm driving out, and gave me a little bit of closure on that one.
To go back and see that people getting on with it. Even though there's still minefields, millions of mines being lifted, and military wreckage, the people are just getting on with life, and it's a healthy experience for someone like myself to go and see that this country is moving beyond war now.
I think it brought out something that I had inside of me for all of those years. It opened up the wound, if I can call it that. I feel better. There's stuff that haunted me which I've put behind me, but I don't think it will ever completely get out of my system. I'm still trying. We're talking about a month down the line, and I still have a lot of emotions inside of me, but I'm converting it into a passion for doing something more and not just stopping where I've been now, and try and get more people involved in it, and that's helping me currently.
While ex-soldiers like Paul and Johan regret their involvement in Angola and have attempted to reach out a hand of reconciliation to the people, a number of vocal former SADF soldiers on various websites don't share these views. While many seem to be holding on to the past, how many more want to make these reconciliatory visits but don't have the means to do so?
I read some stuff on the internet written by SADF veterans who are going on about SADF victories. I think I find it distasteful. I think it's in where we find ourselves in South Africa today. It's one thing to say, it's one thing to have some allegiance to the men you fought with and to your unit, but in the context of South Africa today, bragging about victories without some kind of attempt at making peace on the back of that is just just going to promote more conflict ultimately.
Currently there's too much mudslinging between who won the battle, and we forget about the people that fought the battle. There isn't really support. You can go to your local psychologist, you can go to the government psychologist, but the only people that really understand what's inside of you is the guys that was up there with you, and that's why they stick together. That's why there's intercommunication on websites.
These ex-soldiers who say they unwillingly formed part of the SADF, which fought to extend the lifespan of apartheid, say they've found healing through their journeying back to Angola. But how long will it take the people of Angola to find their healing from a war which shaped their landscape and their lives? How long will it take them to rebuild their future?